You want to get into tanking, but you don't know what to play and you're afraid that you will fuck it up, so might as well try an easy tank to get you in smooth. So now you're here in this video trying to figure out exactly what we consider the easiest tank to play. And we're gonna be ranking them today for you, for your enjoyment. Of course, this is subjective, but I will justify my picks. We're gonna be starting off with the Blood Death Knight, as always, with a recent rework-ish, with a little bit of extra sauce to the meatball bonanza that is Blood Decay. I don't know why I said meatballs, but it does have balls of steel and blood, because you're going in with no healer. That is right, if you do play Blood Decay, you will have no healer. Because there's the secret society of healers that said nobody will ever heal a Blood Death Knight. Do you know why? Because you don't need a healer. That is Blood Death Knight. Now, in terms of the actual difficulty of the spec, I do, or let's say the easiness of the spec, I will actually put it in, let's say, 8. I'm not sure if it's the easiest tank to play, although it is fairly easy. It's also very straightforward. You want to build up your runic power and then use it on Death Strike. There are a few ways you can build up runic power, but mostly with Hard Strike. And you want to make sure that whenever you take damage, you hit your Hard Strike. That is your only job in the world. And if you do so, you will survive and also, weirdly enough, tank mobs for some reason. And you'll never need a healer, because that is exactly what Blood Decay is all about. This is also part of why this is a really cool tank to get into, because you are 100% reliant on just yourself. Maybe this makes it a little bit harder, more intimidating, because there's nobody there to save you except you, but that's also very liberating because you're not reliant on the healer being able to do their job properly, so you can just heal yourself. Outside of that, you do have plenty of utility that you can get out there in the open, mostly in terms of dungeons, but you can also be the grip tank of your raid if you do decide to raid with your tank. And you will be very welcome in raids, since everybody loves grips. Might have to compete with some unholy DKs, but we don't know exactly how good they will be, considering that Windwalker and Survival are just crushing the meters right now. And in terms of the tank, it's not particularly hard to play. Your utility are very mobile, which can add some level of difficulty, but you don't need to worry about rolling or charging or leaping into packs that you didn't essentially intend to do. And the overall playstyle is just straightforward. Consume your runes to build runic power, spend runic power to be alive. And before we take a drink and enjoy a Brewmaster experience, I do have to tell you about our second channel, youtube.com/@MarcelianFlame, where you can actually see Marcelian. No, I'm not Marcelian, but you can definitely see Marcelian there, where he and I chat about different things that happen in the world of Warcraft when it comes to news, changes to the game, announcement from Blizzards, and more, and we debate them there, because the sections are basically taken from our Thursday show, WoW Wrap-Up, that is live every Thursday. Head on to our channel, you know, leave a like and subscribe if you feel inclined to, because it is a new channel and it definitely helps the channel grow, and we're putting more and more videos every week. Check it out, raw, unfiltered, the true MarcelianOnline experience. And as far as Brewmaster is concerned, listen, so if S is the easiest tier, then surely Brewmaster will go down in the holy shit. This is not an easy tank to play, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think it has been an easy tank to play for the last 2 years-ish. Although it is a better tank to play in the World Within as opposed to Dragonfly, where we know that Brewmaster has been significantly squishier than you might be comfortable with when it comes to a new tank. But it is also a tank that, personally, I don't recommend the new player to pick up unless you just really like it. Listen, at the end of the day, you can just play whatever you want. It's fine. Listen, just have fun. You are paying your own subscription. I don't care. You enjoy the game. If you are looking for an easy tank to play, or you just want to be prepared before you dive right in, then Brewmaster is not your guy or gal or panda, because real monks are Pandaren. Brewmaster has a lot of intricate mechanics and workings in behind the scene of how you do your rotation, and you still have quite a few buttons. The button bloat has been dialed down if you have been accustomed to it with Dragonflight or have heard rumors about it, but you do have to kind of understand how stagger works, which is not necessarily complicated, but factoring in all of your dodge, all of your brew cooldown reduction, all of your actual defensives, how you do your damage, what kind of damage did you do, it will take quite a bit. And as opposed to Blood Death Knight, Brewmaster is the most mobile tank, and with some of the most specific usage of utility possible, that if you kind of mess it up with a bad place Ring of Peace, you might end up working your team's performance, and that's not really what you want to do. Now, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from playing Brewmaster. It's one of the tanks that I am mostly enjoying at the moment, but you do need to know that it's not an easy cake to swallow. Chew your cakes. And before I derail any longer, let's look at Bear. Bear, over the years, has been known to be one of the easiest tanks to play in the world, and I'm actually debating if I should leave it into A tier. It's not a hard tank to play, and rotational-wise, it might be a little bit more complex to play than Blood Death Knight, to be fair. But Blood Death Knight has the added level of difficulty that even if you miss one of your easy abilities, you might fall behind in your sustain and you might die. As opposed to that, Bear is a rock in terms of tankiness so far. That might change. And you do have some different builds that you can play, which adds some level of variety to your Bear experience, although I don't necessarily call it complexity, because overall the rotation is still going to be fairly simple. You have a couple of generators for your rage and 2 consumers for your rage, one that just gives you armor and one that heals you, and well, actually one more that gives you some damage. But overall, Bear is a fairly simplistic tank to get behind, and not only is it simple, and maybe not as simple as Blood Death Knight, but it is very, very hard to mess up. Your cooldowns are very straightforward, where Barkskin just gives you damage reduction, Survival Instincts gives you damage reduction, all of your cooldowns, Rage of the Sleeper gives you damage reduction, so it's not particularly hard to get behind and very straightforward. Now, I still don't know where to put both of these guys. I think I will readjust my opinion and maybe move Blood Death Knight next to the Bear, because I feel like if we're gonna generalize their overall difficulty, they're very similar in terms of how they actually play and what kind of difficulty you engage with. Some of it is easier for Death Knight, some of it is easier for Bear, but they are almost the same. Now we're going to Prot Paladin, and damn. Listen, Prot Paladin is close to Brewmaster as to maybe one of the hardest tanks to play, but I feel like there needs to be like a little bit of a difference. It's not as hard as Brewmaster, but it feels like you do have way more tools to deal with different situations, and your defensives are probably slightly better, even though Stagger may be one of the most efficient damage mitigations in the game, if you can reliably delete it. But as far as Prot Paladin, it's easier to get behind. It's block. You block and you heal yourself. Block is easy to understand. You just put your shield up and you take less damage. Plus, you can block spells with Prot Paladin, and that's not something that you have to actively engage with. It just happens passively, so you don't need to worry about it or have to spin another plate. And you have also many defensive cooldowns to engage with, and the hero talents actually change the playstyle slightly with Prot Paladin, and having to stay in Consecration is actually a pain. And if somebody that's new with Prot Paladin doesn't know to take, I believe the talent is called Sanctuary, whatever the talent is that makes you retain your tankiness for about 4 seconds once you leave Consecration. If you don't know to pick that, oof, it's gonna suck. But it is particularly harder to play. Now, we could probably interchange Prot Paladin and Brewmaster depending on your personal preference. Some find Paladin harder, some find Monk harder. Maybe because I've played more Paladin than Monk, I consider Paladin a little bit easier, but they might as well just change places depending on where you are coming from. Just know that they're particularly difficult. Maybe I can even put them on the same tier, but I feel like Brew just is slightly more complex and more punishing if you fuck up. As far as Protection Warrior, it used to hold the spot as the hardest tank to play, and that is not so, and it has not been so for the entirety of Dragonflight, and it doesn't feel like it's going to change in the War Within, unfortunately. The Talon build is one of the most consistent ones across the board, maybe the tank with the least amount of talent options, which is a bummer, but it is easier to get into because you don't need to learn different builds, different spells, different interactions. You just shield, block, and do damage, and that's pretty much it. Of course, I'm simplifying a little bit too much, but overall the rotation is very easy. The only reason why I didn't put it all the way into S tier, because I do consider it maybe even easier than Bear and Blood Decay, because you're just so naturally tanky and do so much damage, and you spam a lot of buttons, and although they kind of matter, the order that you spam them won't impact you as much as they might if you play the other two tanks where you might die. With Prot Warrior, it's kind of very hard to die unless your healer just ignores you completely. But you have one of the most stablest HP bars in the game right now, and that's probably why I don't really see it into S tier, although it could be one of the easiest tanks to play. It's also currently in Dragonflight. I don't know if it's going to continue in the War Within. The spec in the game, not just the tank, but the spec in the game with the most amount of APM, aka actions per minute, meaning the number of buttons you press in 1 minute. So you spam a lot of shit, okay? That's Prot Warrior. Vengeance, I think Vengeance actually can go in the empty tier, although maybe it can go next to Prot Warrior, to be honest. I feel like there's a level of difficulty between Vengeance and Prot Paladin, but I still feel like managing your frailty stacks properly is something that not a lot of Vengeance do. I don't do that well either, and it's not 100% straightforward as to how you want to manage your frailty stacks, because maybe it is intuitive for main Vengeance Demon Hunters, but I have Spirit Bomb and Soul Cleave, and it's looking like Spirit Bomb is always the thing that I want to press, yet still I have to press Soul Cleave. Do I press it to maintain frailty? Do I only maintain frailty on one target? Do I press it to heal? No, you still press Spirit Bomb. And then we go to the other side of the talent tree where you have a lot of sigils, which are kind of core to your playstyle. And even though it has been nerfed, I wouldn't be surprised if we still play illuminated sigils. The capstone that gives you 2 charges of Sigil of Flame right now, and I think that's it. I don't think it gives a second charge to anything else, which gives you options of increasing your parry chance, giving you a different kind of mitigating damage that essentially negates the entirety of the damage that you take from a melee attack or any melee swing. But it's RNG, so how do you factor that in with your demon spikes and your demonic? Do you play this build? Do you go to frailty? Do you play a combination of both? And with the increased mobility and the fact that, although it has been made better, Vengeance is still very squishy outside of demon spikes and meta, which is not something that you're probably going to be used to with playing other tanks. Sure, Blood Decay is also squishy without bone shields, and Bear is also squishy without iron furs, but I feel like those two have some pretty strong cooldowns you can just start up with Dancing Rune Weapon and Barkskin, while as with Vengeance, you just press your one meta and that's it. But that's something you probably want to save every now and again and not actually start a pool with a 2-3 minute cooldown. I don't know how long meta is right now for Vengeance Demon Hunter, but it does take a while. So I feel like that's where Vengeance adds a little bit of a complexity level different from the other tanks, not to mention that you have a lot of sigils that provide a lot of utility to your party, like Silence and Fear and Grip, that are cool but also require a little bit of a management and a little bit of skill to press. It's not that difficult because it's a circle that you put on the ground, but you know, adding that on top of everything else that you need to do to maintain aggro and not die does kind of bring it slightly in the sense of Brewmaster, where the utility is very specific and you want to use it and aim it just right to be able to take most benefit out of it. And the entirety of your kit that you bring to a group, even though you have been nerfed, it's still there and it's still really good for dungeons. Maybe not as much for raids. Maybe in raids, to be fair, all tanks are a little bit easier to play. Might take some getting used to it. But as it stands, I believe this is a fair assumption of tanks because, you know, if we put them all into B tier, no tank is very difficult to play. It would just be boring. So spreading them out kind of puts a little bit of a perspective and paints a picture as to, you know, how each maybe performs in relation to each other in terms of the overall difficulty and ease of access when going into it. Of course, this will change for everybody and not everybody might find the tanks the same, and that's fine, because if you don't want to play a tank, maybe you can play a range DPS. And hey, look, if you're looking for an easy range DPS to play, we already have a video on it that we've just released, and you can watch that too. And hey, more options for your mains and alts.